So my first reaction after watching this movie was I was so happy that there were two actors from Breaking Bad here. There's Kevin Rankin and Charles Baker's Skinny Pete, yo. Tight, tight, tight. Wild is directed by Jean-Marc Vallee, written by Nick Hornby. It's based on the memoir entitled Wild From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail by Cheryl Strayed, and stars Reese Witherspoon, Laura Dern, Thomas Sadoski, and Keen McRae. And Wild is the true story of Cheryl Strayed, who's this woman who had been living this really terrible life, this terrible lifestyle, and she decides one day that she's had enough with it, and she voluntarily goes on this literal 1,000-mile hike in order to cleanse herself, to find herself. And I really did enjoy watching Wild. I think it has this amazing central performance from Reese Witherspoon at the very center. Fearless direction really from Jean-Marc Vallée, despite this movie having some really kind of strange editing choices. Now this movie is entitled Wild, and Wild is really what you get in the sense that all the environments that they're in aren't sets. You know, their sets are real wilderness really, and this use of real environments really lets the audience feel the same kind of discomfort that Cheryl is going through on this hike. Even if she doesn't say anything, even if there's no text explaining anything, or if there's no voiceover narration or anything, you really feel like the stress this woman is under. But at the same time, you also feel the tranquility in moments of like really kind of ethereal beauty that she experiences on this hike, because when you're out there in the wilderness you do get best of both worlds. You get the beauty and you get the harshness of everything. And the cinematography from cinematographer Yves Belanger, if I'm saying his name correctly, I think makes every environment feel even harsher than it actually is, which is I think really cool. And what's cool is that this movie doesn't look the same really like throughout the entire thing. Like it really, the look kind of varies from environment to environment. Like different kind of colors pop out as Cheryl moves along. So when she's out in the desert, like you really feel the heat. When she's in like these marshes, you feel the humidity also. And when it starts snowing, you feel cold. When it starts raining, you feel like the wetness of it all. And it's really great how the visuals are able to kind of bring this out in the audience. And these stark visuals, I think, pair up very nicely with the audio, which is just as equally stark. Like all these environments are very wide open spaces, so there's a lot of really kind of distant ambient noises to be heard, and really good use of silence as well. And as a story, Wild isn't really like a narrative of sorts. It really is like a character study in the purest sense. And the character of Cheryl, I think, is very fascinating, especially how she's portrayed here, because what's fascinating to me is that the center of her portrayal in this movie is really her decision to hike. And no doubt she's undergone like a lot of terrible things in her life. She's obviously a very broken person in more ways than one. But her past and her sins and stuff aren't given primary focus in this movie. The primary focus instead is her attempt to heal herself, and it's really nice and refreshing for character study to focus more on that kind of aspect of the character. All the dialogue is really cool because it feels very natural. All of it feels very improvised, which I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually improvised. And of course, at the very center of it all is Reese Witherspoon, who is like the reason to watch this movie, because she's incredible. She really gives a very nuanced sort of physical performance. Like there is a lot of pain in every single action she does. Just putting on the gigantic backpack she has and just trying to hike up certain hills and whatnot. Like there is a lot of physical fatigue in that. But at the same time, there's this undercurrent of like just determination. She is so determined to finish this hike. But there's a lot more emotion also running through her. It's not just the physical fatigue. Like you can just tell from the looks she gives, like the kind of war she's fighting with herself within. Laura Dern portrays Cheryl Strayed's mother in the movie, and I think the way she plays her character is almost completely the opposite of how Reese Witherspoon plays Cheryl Strayed, because the character of Cheryl Strayed's mother is very kind of like persistently optimistic. She's just such a happy person the entire time, and I don't think she plays it in such a way that the mother comes off as ignorant. Like I think the mother really is aware of the hardships that her family is going through, and yet she chooses to be optimistic, and I really like that about her. And the director Jean-Marc Vallée keeps everything as raw as possible. Like I heard that they probably didn't use any makeup here. They really kind of, the crew helped each other like carry their cameras like across these landscapes, and you really feel that from him. And he really isn't afraid to get really close to kind of take kind of precarious, dangerous angles to really get the best emotion out of Reese Witherspoon. And he really is able to show how the inner conflict in Cheryl Strayed's character is kind of juxtaposed next to the outer conflict, the untamed wild. I do have a couple of issues with the movie though. For one, the editing by John McMurphy and Martin Pensa, it's very stream of consciousness, and I understand if you like that kind of stuff because it is really kind of interesting. But you get just so many this barrage of images that sometimes it just felt kind of unnecessary to me. That it kind of confused me more than it added positively to the character of Cheryl Strayed. So that was kind of weird for me. And because of the strange editing, when the ending arrives, it doesn't feel as fulfilling because it kind of comes out of nowhere. And at that point, I still felt like I didn't know that much about Cheryl to really kind of be happy about what happens at the end. So I kind of wanted to get to know her a bit more and a bit more linearly, I suppose. But I still do think Wild is a really good movie. It's definitely not as uplifting in the traditional sense as Dallas Buyers Club, but it's definitely a more contemplative movie. And you should definitely check it out if you are a fan of Jean-Marc Vallee's kind of raw style. So those are my thoughts on Wild. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.